The first day the Vantari arrived was like any other, except for the massive ships that darkened the skies. They hovered above major cities, emitting a soft hum that seemed to resonate through the very air. For hours, no one knew what to do. Governments scrambled to issue statements, some welcoming the aliens, others urging caution. In the midst of the chaos, the Vantari didn't move. They simply watched, waiting. Humanity had always dreamed of first contact with alien life, but nothing could have prepared them for this. Their ships were not sleek or elegant like the ones in science fiction. Instead, they were jagged and imposing, made of materials that seemed to shift and shimmer in the light. The Vantari themselves were tall, with smooth, metallic skin and eyes that glowed faintly in shades of blue and purple. They communicated in a voice that seemed to vibrate through the air, a calm, almost soothing tone that carried an undertone of superiority. "We come in peace," the Vantari leader, a being named Azara, said during their first public broadcast. "Your planet is rich in resources, and we offer you technology to advance your civilization. In exchange, we ask only for cooperation." There was no threat in their words, no hint of hostility. Yet something about them felt wrong. Azara's face, though perfectly calm and serene, held no warmth. The people of Earth felt the weight of her gaze as if they were being judged, not for what they could contribute, but for how little they had to offer. They were treated as if humanity's entire existence was simply a minor inconvenience, a stepping stone to something greater. "We will assist your world," Azara continued. "In return, we expect your loyalty. Together, we can create a future unlike any other." Some saw the Vantari as saviors. They brought technology that could end hunger, heal diseases, and eliminate pollution. Cities were rebuilt in days, infrastructures repaired in weeks. The technology they offered seemed to have no limits, each device more advanced than anything Earth scientists had ever dreamed of. Governments bowed to their expertise, and leaders hailed them as the future of mankind. Yet for many, the offer felt too good to be true. "We must be careful," whispered Alex, an engineer from a small town, watching the broadcast in disbelief. He wasn't sure what bothered him more: the Vantari's calm demeanor or the hollow promises of a future too perfect to be real. His colleagues, all of whom had been part of the global effort to develop human technologies, exchanged worried glances. They didn't trust the Vantari, but they didn't know why. There were others who feared the Vantari's presence. Across the globe, a small but growing resistance began to form. People who had been watching the aliens' every move felt increasingly uncomfortable. How could a species so advanced and so powerful be so willing to give humanity technology without asking for anything in return? What were they really after? It wasn't long before the first whispers of rebellion reached Alex's ears. He met with a group of like-minded individuals who shared his growing suspicions. They were mostly ordinary people: engineers, mechanics, former soldiers, and even a few former diplomats. All of them had one thing in common: they believed humanity could stand on its own, without the help of extraterrestrial overlords. As the days passed, the Vantari's control over Earth grew more evident. They didn't just offer help, they began to impose their methods, subtly replacing human systems with their own. The world became divided, those who welcomed the change and those who resisted. But the question remained: what was the Vantari's true intention? Alex wasn't willing to sit back and let humanity be swallowed up by these so-called saviors. He couldn't shake the feeling that the Vantari's peace was a lie, and if no one else would take a stand, he would. He wasn't sure how, but he knew one thing for certain: they had underestimated humanity, and it was time to prove them wrong. The day Alex decided to act, the world was still reeling from the Vantari's overwhelming presence. Governments across the globe had been signing treaties with the aliens, agreeing to their conditions in exchange for technology. The initial excitement had begun to wear off, and the cracks were starting to show. People in the streets whispered about the Vantari's growing influence, but no one knew how to fight back. That was when Alex and his small group of like-minded individuals gathered in secret. It began in a small, nondescript warehouse at the edge of a forgotten industrial district. The place was hardly ever used anymore, its rusting walls and broken windows a far cry from the gleaming buildings of the Vantary's tech centers. But for Alex and his crew, it felt like the perfect place to start. There were 6 of them at first. Alex, the mastermind behind the plan. Laura, a former military strategist with a keen mind for tactics. Javier, an ex-mechanic who could make anything from a pile of scrap. Sarah, a brilliant hacker who had already begun breaking into the Vantary's communication networks. Daryl, a retired soldier who had fought in numerous wars and was ready for another fight. And Maya, an engineer whose skills were second to none. Together, they made an unlikely team, but it was the only team that mattered. I've been thinking about this for weeks. Alex began, standing in front of a large chalkboard covered with blueprints and maps. The Vantary are powerful, no doubt, but they think we're weak. They see us as a species to control. But I don't believe we're powerless. We just have to use what we have. Laura, who had been silently listening, spoke up. And what exactly do we have? We're not fighting them with their own weapons. We're fighting them with junk. Alex smiled. Exactly. That's the advantage. The Vantary rely on their advanced technology, their precision, their order. But what if we built something they didn't expect? Something chaotic, something unpredictable, something they couldn't control. The room was silent for a moment as the others processed what Alex was suggesting. Then Lara leaned forward, her expression intense. You want to build a ship from scrap. It's more than that, Alex said. We're going to build a battle vessel, something they can't even imagine. We'll use Earth's resources, everything they've discarded, everything they think is worthless, and turn it into a weapon made from our own ingenuity. Sarah, who had been running diagnostics on her tablet, looked up. You think we can actually build something that can take on their ships? They're light years ahead of us. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, Alex admitted, but if we can reverse engineer some of their technology and combine it with what we know, we might just have a fighting chance. It won't be a shiny, perfect machine. But that's the point. It'll be a human machine, imperfect, unpredictable, and stronger than anything they've ever seen. Daryl, who had been sitting quietly with his arms crossed, finally spoke. I like it. I've seen too many wars, too many systems that think they're invincible. But in every war, it's the underdogs who turn the tide. I'm in. Maya nodded. I can get started on the designs, start scavenging parts. I know where to look. And so the group made their decision. They would build the ship, not in a laboratory, not in a high-tech facility, but in a hidden warehouse, using scrap metal, old vehicles, discarded tech, and anything else they could find. The world might see them as a bunch of misfits, but Alex knew better. They weren't just building a ship, they were building a symbol of humanity's refusal to be underestimated. The first few weeks were filled with frustrations and setbacks. They had no funding, no support, and no way to keep their activities under wraps. They had to move quickly, scavenging parts in the dead of night, and working in secret to avoid detection. But every small victory fueled their resolve. A piece of an old military tank here, a section of a decommissioned airplane there. They pieced together the beginnings of a vessel, strange and jagged, but functional. As the ship began to take form, so did their confidence. They had started as a small, ragtag group of misfits, but now they felt like something more. They were fighters, rebels who refused to let their world be controlled. And slowly, they began to realize that they weren't just building a ship. They were building a revolution. The Vantary may have thought they were superior, but humanity was about to show them that strength didn't come from perfect technology. It came from something far more powerful: ingenuity, creativity, and the unbreakable will to survive. And Alex knew one thing for sure. They would not go down without a fight. The warehouse had become both a sanctuary and a battlefield. For the past few weeks, Alex and his team had been working tirelessly, scavenging parts and assembling their vessel. The world outside continued to change under the Vantari's watchful eyes, but within the rusted walls of the warehouse, the team's focus never wavered. There were no distractions here. It was a place where the impossible could become real, where a group of ordinary people could defy the odds. The ship was taking shape, though it looked nothing like the sleek, advanced vessels the Vantari had arrived in. Instead, it was an awkward collection of mismatched parts, an old military tank chassis for the hull, reinforced with large sheets of scrap metal, and a series of jet engines scavenged from retired aircraft. The cockpit was a patchwork of metal panels, and every inch of the vessel was reinforced with components salvaged from old war machines and decommissioned vehicles. It wasn't pretty, but it was sturdy. Alex stood in front of the ship, his arms crossed as he surveyed their progress. Lara was at one of the makeshift workstations, running through a set of calculations on a tablet, while Maya inspected the ship's engine components. Daryl and Javier were welding pieces together, the air thick with the hum of machinery and the sharp scent of metal. They had their hands full, but Alex could see that they were all starting to believe in what they were building. "I think we're getting close," Maya said, wiping the sweat from her brow as she stepped back to admire her work. "The engine's almost ready. I've managed to patch together enough old turbine parts to give us some decent speed. Maybe not Vantari level, but it'll do. The real challenge will be the weapons." Alex nodded, his mind already racing ahead. The weapons were a problem. The Vantari's technology was vastly superior, and while they had managed to reverse engineer a few of their systems, building a weapon capable of dealing with their ships was another story. Still, they were determined to figure it out. If they couldn't match the Vantari's firepower, they would have to outsmart them. "Sarah, any luck with the Vantari systems?" Alex called over to the corner of the warehouse, where the hacker was plugged into a series of old computers, running code, and trying to crack the alien network. Sarah looked up, her eyes tired but focused. "I've been able to get some data on their weapon systems. It's not much, but I've managed to decode some basic targeting algorithms. We can use that to adapt our targeting systems. As for actual weapons, we'll have to improvise. But I've got an idea." Alex raised an eyebrow. "What kind of idea?" Sarah smiled, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "Well, remember that old satellite launcher we picked up last week? I think I can rig it to fire some modified projectiles. Nothing fancy, but it'll give us some punch. We're going to need every advantage we can get." Alex felt a surge of excitement. It wasn't much, but it was something. And every little victory mattered. "Great. Let's get it set up. We can test it out tomorrow." As the days passed, the team worked in overdrive. They had no time to waste. The Vantari's presence was growing stronger, and every day that passed felt like another missed opportunity. There was no going back now. One evening, as the last of the sunlight filtered through the cracks in the warehouse walls, Alex stood at the front of the vessel, watching the team put the finishing touches on the ship. It was rough, unpredictable, but it was theirs. This ship, made from the forgotten scraps of humanity, was going to be their answer to the Vantari. "This is it," Lara said, her voice filled with a mix of awe and determination. "We're ready." Alex nodded. "Not yet. We still have a lot of testing to do. But we're closer than we've ever been." Daryl, who had been quiet for a while, spoke up. "You know, when I first joined this team, I thought we were crazy. But now I think we might actually have a shot. This thing might just surprise the Vantari." "Surprise them," Maya said with a grin. "We're not just going to surprise them. We're going to show them that they've underestimated humanity." And for the first time in weeks, Alex allowed himself a smile. He had always known that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its technology or its weapons. It was in its ability to adapt, to think differently, to make something out of nothing. The Vantari had come here thinking they were invincible, but they had no idea what they were up against. The team gathered around, their faces lit by the glow of the ship's engines. They weren't just a group of people building a vessel anymore. They were a force that would remind the Vantari and the entire world that humanity could rise to any challenge, no matter how impossible it seemed. Tomorrow, they would test the vessel. Tomorrow, they would prove to the Vantari that underestimating humanity had been their biggest mistake. The moment had arrived. The team stood in the shadow of their creation, their hands shaking with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The ship, a mishmash of discarded parts and reverse-engineered tech, gleamed under the dim lights of the warehouse. Despite its unpolished exterior, the vessel exuded a strange kind of strength, as if every dent and scratch told a story of resilience. Alex, Maya, Lara, Sarah, Daryl, and Javier stood together, their eyes focused on the ship's engines, which were now humming to life. Alex ran a hand through his hair. "All right, this is it," he said, his voice steady, though his heart raced in his chest. "We've built something that no one expected, but it's time to see if it can actually fly." Maya, standing beside the control panel, checked the ship's systems one last time. Engines are stable, weapons are online, and targeting is operational. Though I'm not sure how well it'll handle the Vantari ships. This thing wasn't designed for grace, but it should get us off the ground. Lara crossed her arms. "Grace doesn't matter. We're not trying to look good, we're trying to survive." Sarah tapped away at her tablet, running through diagnostics and ensuring everything was good to go. "Let's make sure we can actually get out of here before we worry about dodging missiles." Daryl, standing at the ship's hatch, looked back at the group. "You all know the plan. We test it in the air first. No confrontations unless we have to. Once we get comfortable with the controls, we head straight for the outskirts of the city. The last thing we want is to attract attention before we're ready." With a deep breath, Alex nodded. "Let's do this." As the team climbed aboard, the inside of the ship felt more cramped than expected. The cockpit was a jumble of old buttons, wires, and hastily installed alien tech. It wasn't pretty, but it would get the job done. Alex took the pilot's seat, with Lara at his side as co-pilot. Sarah sat in the back, monitoring the ship's systems, while Maya and Daryl worked on weapon control and scanning for any incoming threats. "Here we go," Alex muttered under his breath, powering up the ship. The engines roared to life, a mix of hums and rattles as the ship's body vibrated from the force of the power surging through it. For a moment, it felt as though the whole thing might shake apart, but then the vessel lurched into the air, shaking off its hesitation. They were airborne. For the first time, Alex felt a wave of exhilaration wash over him. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but the ship was flying, and with each moment, they moved further from the earth, climbing higher into the sky. "Altitude stable," Lara called out. "You've got this, Alex." But the sense of relief was short-lived. As they gained altitude, a faint beep from Sarah's console caught everyone's attention. "We've got a Vantari drone approaching," she said, her voice calm, though a hint of tension was creeping in. "It's scanning us." "Already?" Daryl's voice was a low growl. "How do they know we're here?" Alex clenched the controls. "Doesn't matter. We're not in a position to avoid a fight, but we'll use the terrain to our advantage. We're not going to let some drone ruin our first test." He turned the ship sharply, banking toward the mountain range just outside the city. The vessel's engines hummed louder as Alex pushed it harder than they had in their testing simulations. The ship shuddered as it veered, responding slower than expected, but it managed to follow his commands. "Nice maneuver," Lara said, her eyes focused on the drone approaching in their rear view. "They'll have a hard time tracking us in these canyons." The drone's targeting systems locked on them, its weapons primed and ready. Alex pushed the ship lower, skimming just above the jagged rocks, using the uneven terrain to shield them. The Vantari drone fired. Red beams shot past them, scorching the air where they had been just seconds before. The vessel rattled from the near miss, but Alex gritted his teeth and pushed forward, keeping the ship close to the ground. "Brace for impact," Maya shouted as she engaged the ship's weapons. The ship jolted as Maya fired back, launching a makeshift projectile, a crude but powerful combination of old military rocket tech and salvaged alien weaponry. The blast hit the drone dead on, sending it spiraling to the ground in a burst of sparks and flames. It crashed into the rocky terrain below, destroyed. Everyone exhaled at the same time, a collective release of breath they hadn't realized they'd been holding. "We did it," Daryl said, his voice thick with disbelief. "We actually did it." Alex let out a small laugh, but his face was tight with focus. That was just the first test, but it's a good sign. The ship held up, and we hit the drone with a solid shot. I'd say we're on the right track. Lara looked at him with a grin. "You know what this means, don't you? We're not just building a ship anymore. We're building a weapon." The vessel's thrusters hummed steadily as they leveled off above the mountain range, and Alex allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. But the reality of what was coming was never far from his mind. This was only a test flight, and the Vantari would be watching, waiting for any signs of rebellion. They had just made their first strike, but the real battle was yet to come. "We're just getting started," Alex said, glancing at his crew. "Now, let's see how much further we can take this." The days following the first successful test flight were a blur of activity. The team worked tirelessly, tweaking and refining the ship, preparing it for what they knew was coming. The Vantari were not going to let a lone ragtag group of rebels stand in their way. Alex knew that the moment they made their move, the aliens would respond with everything they had. The ship wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was their best shot at survival. Inside the warehouse, the atmosphere had shifted. What had once been a collection of mismatched individuals now felt like a team, a family, even. They had survived the first test, and with it, a sense of camaraderie had grown between them. They were no longer just fighting for themselves, they were fighting for humanity. They had made something from nothing, something that could stand up to the seemingly invincible Vantari. But despite their progress, Alex knew the real challenge was still ahead. How are the systems holding up? Alex asked as he walked into the workshop, where Maya and Javier were working on the ship's engine. Maya glanced up, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "Better than expected. The engines are stronger now, and the weapons are more reliable. We've also reinforced the hull with some more scrap metal, so it can take a few more hits. We're ready to face more than just drones, that's for sure." Javier nodded. "But we need to be careful. The ship's not built for long-range combat. If the Vantari send a whole fleet, we might be in trouble." Alex rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "We're not going to go up against a fleet. Not yet, at least. Our goal is to strike quickly, hit them where it hurts, and then get out. Hit and run tactics. We can't win a prolonged fight, not with the resources we have. But we can be unpredictable." Lara, who had been silently watching from the corner, stepped forward. "If we strike hard enough, it might buy us the time we need to gain support. There's a lot of people out there who are starting to wake up to what the Vantari are really doing. If we can show them we're capable of resisting, others will join the fight." Alex nodded. "I like that idea. But we'll need to be quick, and we can't afford to make any mistakes." He turned to Sarah, who was sitting at a table, eyes glued to her tablet. "What's the word from the Vantari network?" Sarah sighed, her fingers tapping restlessly against the screen. "They're tightening security. The drones have been more active, and their communication systems are being reinforced. But we're still able to get some data through. They're focused on the cities, not expecting anything out here in the outskirts. If we act now, we might be able to hit them before they can react." Alex's heart beat faster. The opportunity was there, but they had to move quickly. "Okay, let's do it. We'll hit them where they least expect it." The team gathered around the blueprint they had been working on, eyes scanning the map of the Vantari facilities. Alex pointed to a location just outside one of the major cities, a Vantari supply depot, crucial to their operation. This is where we strike. It's heavily guarded, but it's isolated. If we can take out their supply lines, it'll slow them down, give us the breathing room we need. Lara met his gaze, her voice firm. It's risky, but it's our best shot. We'll need to get in fast, disable their defenses, and take out the supply stockpiles. We can't afford to get caught, Daryl added, his expression hardening. If we're discovered, it'll be over. We won't be discovered, Alex said, his tone unwavering. We've trained for this. We've built something they don't expect. We can do this. As the plan took shape, a sense of quiet determination settled over the group. No one spoke of the dangers they faced. There was no time for fear. The Vantari had come to Earth with a promise of peace, but they had only brought control. Now it was time to remind them that humanity wasn't going to bend to anyone's will. They would fight for their freedom, and they would take the fight to the Vantari's doorstep. The team spent the next few hours preparing, double-checking everything from weapons systems to escape routes. The weight of the mission hung heavily over them, but there was no turning back. This was their moment, the first real strike of the rebellion. Alex took one last look at the ship before they boarded. The vessel was no longer just a collection of parts. It was a symbol of resistance. They were not powerless. They were not weak. And they would not be underestimated again. "Let's go," Alex said, his voice steady and resolute. "It's time to show the Vantari what happens when they mess with humanity." The ship was airborne once again, cutting through the sky with a newfound sense of purpose. The team was on edge, but there was no turning back. Their target was in sight, the Vantari supply depot that could cripple the aliens' operations in the region. Alex gripped the controls, his mind focused on the mission. He could feel the weight of their decision pressing on his chest. This was it, the first real challenge of the rebellion. "Everyone ready?" Alex asked, his voice calm despite the storm of thoughts racing through his mind. Lara was at his side, her eyes scanning the flight path ahead. "Ready as we'll ever be. The Vantari won't expect an attack from here, but we still need to be fast and precise. We're in and out, no unnecessary risks." Sarah, seated behind them, adjusted her headset. "I've hacked into their communications grid. I can give us a 5-minute window before their defenses fully recognize our presence. After that, it's going to get a lot harder to stay unnoticed." 5 minutes, Alex repeated. "That's all we need. After that, we hit hard and fast." The ship flew low, staying beneath the radar, just as they'd practiced. The Vantari depot was still several miles away, nestled between the jagged hills, surrounded by automated sentries and armed drones. Alex had mapped out the best route, using the terrain to their advantage. He knew they wouldn't have a second chance if they messed this up. "We're coming up on the perimeter," Lara said, her voice sharp with focus. "Once we breach the outer defenses, we'll have to make it quick. You're on weapons, Maya." Maya gave a short nod, her fingers hovering over the control panel. "Ready. I've got everything set up to disable their outer defenses. I'll target their turrets and drones first. We can't afford any delays." "Good," Alex replied, glancing at the time ticking down on Sarah's display. "Take out their sensors. We don't want them sending reinforcements before we're done." They neared the depot, and the tension in the ship's cabin grew thicker. The proximity alarms started to buzz softly, warning them of the security perimeter they were approaching. Sarah's fingers flew over her tablet, feeding them crucial information on the Vantari surveillance systems. 3 minutes, Sarah called out. "I'm disabling their outer sensors. Stay close to the ground." Alex banked sharply, diving into a narrow canyon that led directly toward the depot's edge. The ship shook with the strain of the tight maneuver, but it held together, the engines roaring in response. The Vantari's defenses were about to activate, but they were still a step ahead. 2 minutes, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the mounting pressure. The ship flew through the canyon, closer now, and the depot loomed ahead. Automated drones began to rise from the ground, their red lights flashing as they began to detect movement. Maya's hand hovered over the weapon systems, ready for the moment. Now, Alex ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. Maya fired first, sending a burst of concentrated energy at the nearest drone. It exploded in a cloud of fire and metal. She immediately targeted the next, taking out one of the turret defenses before it could lock onto them. The ship jolted as the weapons fired, but Alex held the controls steady, weaving through the firestorm. "Keep them off us," Alex shouted. "On it." Daryl's voice came from the rear. He was in charge of the ship's rear sensors, keeping an eye on anything that might surprise them from behind. "No sign of reinforcements yet. We've got a minute before they send backup." Lara's eyes flicked over the redouts. "We're inside. We've breached the outer perimeter. Let's hit the supply storage now and get out of here." They flew deeper into the heart of the Vantari depot. The supply storage was heavily guarded, but the team was prepared. The ship was faster, more agile than the Vantari had anticipated, and they used that advantage to full effect. The automated defenses struggled to keep up, unable to track the unpredictable movements of the vessel. Alex slammed the ship into a dive, heading straight for the heart of the supply depot. The weapon systems blazed once again, ripping through the storage units holding the Vantari's critical resources. Explosions rocked the facility as the team struck the heart of the depot's operations. "Good hit," Maya shouted over the comms. "Their backup fuel and weapon supplies are compromised. That should cause a lot of disruption. Let's not hang around to see the fallout," Lara said quickly. "Time to go." Alex didn't hesitate. He spun the ship around, heading toward the narrow canyon they'd come through. The ship rattled as the Vantari launched a counterattack, but the team had already gained too much ground. The ship surged forward, engines at full power, weaving in and out of the canyon walls as enemy fire came dangerously close. "We're almost clear," Daryl yelled. "Keep your course steady." They made it out of the canyon, their path finally clear of pursuing fire. The depot lay behind them, burning, a symbol of their first strike against the Vantari. The team let out a collective breath, their bodies tense with adrenaline. "That was too close," Sarah muttered, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "But it worked. We've made a dent in their operations." Alex looked over at his team, his heart pounding in his chest. They had done it. They had struck the Vantari where it hurt, and they had gotten away with it. "This is just the beginning," Alex said quietly. "We've shown them what humanity can do when we fight back." The exhilaration of their first successful mission slowly gave way to a growing sense of urgency. The team had struck a blow to the Vantari supply lines, but Alex knew that the aliens wouldn't take it lying down. They had shown their enemies what humanity was capable of, but the Vantari were powerful and relentless. The ripples from their strike were just beginning to spread, and the storm they had stirred was bound to hit soon. Back at the warehouse, the team was hard at work, analyzing the aftermath of their raid. The sounds of machines whirring and people moving quickly filled the air, but there was a tension now that hadn't been there before. The Vantari would retaliate, and the question wasn't if they would strike back, it was when. "We hit them hard," Maya said, her voice thoughtful as she reviewed the data Sarah had gathered from the mission. "The supply depot is burning and their fuel lines are compromised. That'll slow them down for a while. But we got to know one thing. How soon will they start hunting us?" Sarah sat at her station, eyes flicking across a set of readouts. "They've already begun to reestablish communications. Their response time will be quicker than we thought. We've made them aware of our capabilities now. They'll be coming for us. It's only a matter of time before they start ramping up their search." Alex crossed his arms, feeling the weight of the situation. "We knew this wasn't going to be easy. We got a window, but it's a small one. We need to make our next move count. We can't afford to keep waiting around for them to come to us." Lara nodded, her eyes narrowing. "We got to hit them again before they can fully mobilize. If we wait too long, they'll be more prepared, and we'll lose our advantage." Alex turned to Sarah. "What do you have for us? Any weaknesses we can exploit?" Sarah's fingers tapped across the tablet as she ran through the data. "There's something interesting. The Vantari's communication network is fragmented. They're reinforcing their main command center, but they're still relying on some outdated infrastructure in remote locations. There are weak points we could target, places where their defenses aren't as strong." Daryl leaned in, his arms folded. "Like what?" "We don't have much time." Sarah glanced up at them. "We've identified a secondary communications outpost near the eastern border. It's lightly defended and isn't on their radar yet. If we hit it, we could knock out a major chunk of their long-range communication network. It would cripple their ability to coordinate large-scale operations." Alex's mind raced. How long until they catch on to that outpost? "Not long," Sarah said. "Maybe a couple of days before they notice something's off. We'd need to move fast. If we strike, it has to be now." Lara gave him a knowing look. "We've got one shot at this. If we hit that outpost, we might just buy ourselves the time we need to build up some real resistance. But if we miss, we'll be on the Vantari's radar for good." Alex took a deep breath, looking around at his team. They had already defied the odds once, but this was different. This was their chance to give humanity a real fighting chance, to show the world that they weren't helpless. The Vantari had underestimated them before, but if they succeeded now, it would send a message. Humans weren't just going to roll over. "We've got a plan," Alex said, his voice steady but firm. "We hit that outpost, we disrupt their communications, and we do it fast. No hesitation. We're taking the fight to them, and we're not waiting for them to come to us." The team nodded in agreement. They had been pushed to the edge before, but this time felt different. They weren't just reacting to the Vantari. They were taking control of their own fate. Maya was already running calculations on the ship's systems. "We can't take the same route as last time. It's too predictable. We'll need to come at this from a different angle. Use the terrain to stay under the radar." Daryl smiled. "I'll get the ship ready. We're not going to give them any chance to track us." Sarah, her eyes locked on the screen in front of her, typed furiously. "I'll keep their comms scrambled. We'll have the element of surprise on our side." Alex walked over to the ship, his gaze steady as he took in the vessel. It was rough, but it had become more than just a tool. It had become their weapon, their symbol of defiance. "This is it," Alex said, his voice filled with conviction. "We show them what happens when you mess with humanity. We make them regret ever underestimating us." The night before their mission, the air in the warehouse was thick with anticipation. The team had spent hours strategizing and preparing, but now, as the first light of dawn filtered through the cracks in the walls, there was a quiet sense of resolve among them. The Vantari would soon learn that humanity was not to be underestimated again. Alex stood near the ship, running his fingers along the rough edges of the vessel, his thoughts heavy. This mission, targeting the Vantari's secondary communication outpost, was critical. It was their chance to deal a devastating blow to their enemy's ability to coordinate, giving them a fighting chance in the coming days. "We're not just attacking their outpost," Alex said, turning to face his team. "This is bigger than that. We're sending a message to the Vantari, to the rest of humanity. We're not weak. We're not broken. We're fighting back." Lara, as always, was the first to nod in agreement. "We've shown we can hit them where it hurts. Now we need to make sure they know we're capable of more. We hit fast, we hit hard, and we get out before they know what hit them." "Exactly," Daryl said, adjusting the weapon systems in the vac. "If we take out their comms, they'll lose the ability to organize their forces. That'll buy us the time we need to regroup and get more people in on this fight." Maya finished calibrating the ship's engines, glancing up with a smile. "I've made a few adjustments to the ship's stealth mode. It's going to be even harder for them to detect us this time." "I'm ready," Sarah said, her fingers flying across her tablet. I've already tapped into their communications grid again. They're not expecting us, and it'll be a while before they notice anything's wrong. We've got a window. We need to move, and we need to move now." Alex gave them all a determined look. "Then let's get to it. This isn't just about us anymore. This is for everyone who's been too afraid to fight, for everyone who's suffered under the Vantari's control." The team climbed aboard the ship, the sense of unity among them palpable. As the engines roared to life, Alex took his place at the controls, while Lara sat beside him as co-pilot. Daryl, Maya, and Sarah took their positions in the back, each ready for the task ahead. The ship lifted off, and they flew toward the eastern border, where the Vantari's secondary communications outpost was located. The flight was smooth, but the tension in the cabin was undeniable. Each of them knew the stakes. This mission wasn't just about taking out another target. It was about proving that humanity would no longer be controlled by the Vantari. They had the power to strike back, and they were going to use it. As they neared the outpost, Alex veered the ship into a narrow canyon, staying low to the ground to avoid detection. Sarah worked quickly, scrambling the Vantari sensors and communications, making sure they wouldn't see them coming. "We're close," Sarah said, her voice tight with focus. "They still don't have us on their radar. Just a little further." Maya prepared the weapons, ensuring they were locked on the target, ready to disable their main communication array. "We'll knock them out in one shot." Alex nodded, his heart pounding as they closed in on the outpost. It was a sprawling facility, surrounded by a mix of automated sentries and armed drones. The facility's defenses were minimal, but they would still be a challenge. Alex was determined not to waste time. They had one shot at this. "Now," Alex commanded, pushing the ship into a steep climb. The ship surged forward, locking onto the communication array at the heart of the outpost. Maya fired, sending a powerful pulse of energy that struck the array directly. The explosion was immediate, sending a shockwave through the facility as sparks flew into the air. The Vantari defenses erupted into chaos, drones spiraling into the sky, trying to organize but failing to keep up with the rapid attack. Maya quickly targeted the remaining turrets, neutralizing them with precision. "Target disabled," Maya confirmed, her voice steady. "We've crippled their comms. They won't be able to coordinate a response in time." "Let's get out of here," Alex said, his voice sharp as he began their escape route. The Vantari would be coming soon, but they had bought themselves time. The ship banked hard, racing back toward the canyon. The Vantari's drones began to chase, but the team was already on their way out. The vessel's agility, combined with the element of surprise, gave them a significant advantage. "Reinforcements inbound," Daryl warned, his voice tense. "We need to pick up speed." Alex pushed the ship's engines to their limits, weaving through the canyon, narrowly avoiding incoming fire. The ship rattled as a few shots clipped the edges, but it held together. The Vantari were persistent, but the crew was faster, smarter, and more determined than they had anticipated. Finally, they broke through the canyon and into open air, the ship's engines roaring as they climbed higher, leaving the chaos behind. The Vantari pursuit faded as they gained altitude, and for a moment, the team allowed themselves to relax. They had done it again. They had struck at the heart of the Vantari's operations and gotten away. "Nice work, everyone," Alex said, his voice filled with pride. "We've sent them another message. We're not backing down." Lara grinned, "And we're just getting started." As the team soared into the sky, looking out over the world below, Alex couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. The Vantari might have underestimated them before, but humanity had just taken its first real steps toward reclaiming its freedom. The fight was far from over, but today they had won, and that was enough for now.